Hey everyone, happy holidays. And to start off the holiday season, I'm going to talk about once more one of my favorite writers, Grant Morrison. But it's not Klaus yet. We are going to cover their 2013 comic, Happy. Now, this is going to be a really quick review since, as you can tell with my voice, I'm still not feeling great. And maybe it is because I was pretty tired and I just wasn't looking hard enough, but when I did try looking into the origin of why this book was made, I unfortunately came a little short. I will say, though, that it was still a big deal to a lot of comic fans since Grant Morrison was going to actually be collaborating with Derek Robertson, who many Garth Ennis fans will immediately recognize him for being the artist for the Boys comic series. Though if you really want to know where he really got his name, it was the comic series Transmetropolitan. How does art style work with the Chaos Wizard? Well, let's get into that as we dive into Happy. Warning, spoilers. Okay, before I begin, I really should remind people that though I do talk about a lot of comics and occasionally books that do have connections to kid shows, not all comics are for kids, and this is no exception, as one of the first things that happen in this comic is seeing a man dressed like Shellfish trying to bash a hooker's brains in while she is servicing him. Merry Christmas, everyone. But before he can finish the job, he is stopped by Nick Sachs, who is a former cop turned hitman and all around drunken asshole. But killing him was not the plan. You see, he has bigger targets. Nephews of a mob boss who goes by the name Mr. Blue. Guess Grant's a fan of Reservoir Dogs. Nick takes them all out except for one, who begs for his life, saying that he knows a password to a bank account that only him and his brothers knew, and he'd be happy to give it to him. Nick, though, doesn't really give a crap and just shoots him. Nick's about to leave, but suffers a heart attack and falls on the ground. Luckily for him, an ambulance comes in and takes both him and also the guy that he just shot. Yet turned out that he didn't die, but he's not gonna last long. But before he dies, he does tell one corrupt cop, a Detective McCarthy, that he did tell Nick the password, which just like that, immediately he has his revenge, since by telling everyone that Nick knows his password, it paints a large target on his back, since his uncle would very much want that password and go through anyone to get it. Right now, this comic is very grounded, very gritty, and though Grant Morrison is not totally alien from it, it's still not something that you usually think of when you think Grant Morrison. Until Nick wakes up and he is greeted by a little talking unicorn with wings named Happy. And that is when we finally reach Grant Morrison's madness. Well, a fraction. This is still pretty grounded, actually. Happy is an imaginary friend. In particular, an imaginary friend to a girl named Haley, who has gone missing, so he needs the help of Nick. But before he can do that, he has to help Nick get out of the hospital since, well, it's a mob hospital, meaning that Mr. Blue has easy access to get in, and that his right-hand man, Mr. Smoothie, will have all the tools and resources to torture Nick to get the password. Luckily, though very clumsily, the two are able to escape, and we find out what exactly happened to Haley. She was kidnapped by a guy dressed up like Santa Claus, and he is a very, very disturbed man. So it's up to Happy and Nick to find her, but how are they going to do that? Well, Nick has a massive target on his back, and the only person on his side is an imaginary horse. Well, you're going to have to read to find out. This comic is actually pretty simple. It's a quick read, and does show us that Grant Morrison can do more than just the crazy, out-of-this-world type of stuff. I mean, again, even though this is a story where a hitman is teaming up with an imaginary friend, it never goes super insane compared to like Klaus, where we actually had a storyline where Santa Claus has to fight a vampire werewolf hybrid clone while a bunch of aliens are smoking children like hookahs. Or We 3, where a town decides to turn a bunch of animals into cyborg super soldiers. Like, I can keep going, but yeah, you get the point. Grant does a lot of crazy stuff. So it was interesting to see them actually go for something more simple. Though, if you do want to see a much more insane version of the series, I'd actually recommend checking out the Sci-Fi series adaptation of it, where, yeah, it gets nuts. I'm talking witches, demigods, and some of the horrors of the children entertainment industry. Now, as you can guess with the opening alone, this is a very adult comic. It's very gruesome, very violent, and yeah, they don't sugarcoat anything here. It gets messed up. But unlike The Boys, where sometimes it feels like it's just there for shock humor, this actually feels appropriate. It goes as far as it needs to be, and it never feels like Grant had to do these things to get your attention. Something that I was legit worried about when I first heard about this story. Now, let's talk about the characters. Nick is, as I mentioned before, a drunken bastard. We do find out later that he actually used to start off as a good man and a good cop, but of course, like how most of these stories go, something went wrong and he became just this horrible human being who honestly just lives his life just fighting, killing, or just straight up ripping off fellow scumbags to make ends meet. At first, he only really works with Happy just so he can get him off his back, though he's not a total scumbag, as once he does find out what's going on with the kids, he does step up and actually try to do the right thing. Since Nick didn't start off like this, but as time went on and as more desperate he got, he started to believe that all he can really do is be like this. But Happy wants to prove to him otherwise. Now, when you first see Happy, you think that he's just gonna be like this goofy cartoon character that's not gonna get adult humor, but quite the contrary, he's fully aware of it, he just doesn't like talking like that. He's an optimist who really likes to see the good in people, which makes sense since he was made by a child who, though we don't really see much of Haley to really get a proper idea of her character, it's very clear that she is an innocent kid who really had a pretty innocent childhood up to this point. But that's kind of what an imaginary friend's meant to be. It's meant to be the embodiment of child innocence, the good that kids are taught to believe in. Detective McCarthy is a very interesting character since, much like Nick, she started off as a pretty good cop, but went more on the corrupted side. She honestly hates her job, and by this point she's really starting to hate her life, since she still wants to do good, but she feels like she has no other option. You really start to wonder whose side she's on as she tries to look for Nick. There's a lot more I could say about her regarding her character in the TV show, but in the comic, not much, though there are some hints that there would have been more to her character if the story continued. Mr. Blue and the Bad Santa are really just dragons for the characters to face off, and Mr. Blue is an intimidating mob boss, while Bad Santa is just a disgusting human being. Again, there's a lot more I could talk about them if I discussed the TV show, and maybe at some point I will, but for now the comic just has these two vile people who you just want to see being taken down. Finally, there's Mr. Smoothie, and yeah, this guy is just creepy. Besides his sadistic nature and his creepy smile, Smoothie just feels like he has control of the situation every time he appears, with the only one unfazed by his demeanor being Nick. He clearly takes pleasure in just all the awful things he does and has no problem just ruining lives because, well, it makes him happy. Compared to the other two, he is a very interesting villain to follow, and we even got to see an expansion of his character in the TV show. We even get to find out why he's called Mr. Smoothie, and I will say this, not because he likes Jamba Juice or anything, just yikes. As for Dietrich Robertson's art, the best way to describe his art in this book is that if you want to see a comic that just shows the most vile, grimiest, dirtiest, most violent part of humanity, this is probably the book you'll look for. Now, that's actually pretty much expected when you see Robertson's work, because yeah, this book is grimy. It gets to the point where like it feels like if you just touch the page, you should take a shower afterwards. And I'm saying that in the best way possible. And hell, it even makes it when Happy shows up because he looks so cartoonishly innocent. And though I don't know if this was intentional, I will say having three colors were pretty interesting since it makes the story kind of feel like it's evolving, starting from this dark, gritty story of a hitman to a story of an imaginary friend trying to save a young child. In the first two issues, we start with this very noir color scheme with the exception of Happy being this bright blue, but as the series progresses, it starts to get a little bit lighter. Now, I don't know if that was intentional, but if it was, bravo. Again, Happy is a quick read, but a fun one too. And I highly recommend checking it out, especially if you are both a Grant Morrison fan, but also a fan of Robertson's work, or if you want to see a very violent Christmas story and you just don't have the time to watch Die Hard. Either way, this book will definitely make you, well, live up by its namesake. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe, and though I'm still sick, there will be more holiday videos to come. Later.